Wait, wait. I'm not going to compare OpenAI, GPT, and Google Gemini Python SDKs. I'm literally going to start a fight between them by giving them some system instructions to brag about their abilities and trash talk each other's, and feeding the response from one to the other back and forth. Before we start, I have one video for an OpenAI and one for Google Gemini, in which I talk about in a little bit more details how to set up the environment and their Python SDK and how to utilize it. If you're interested, I strongly suggest you watch those as well. So in order to start, to keep the main script easily readable and maintainable, I'm going to have wrapper classes for those models in a separate Python script. So let's start with that. And let's start actually with OpenAI. So from OpenAI, import OpenAI. So let's define the class. I prefer to call it GPT, and in it, well, we need the API key, we need the model, which is basically model name, and something I call system instruction. So I would say self.client equals to, have in mind that the code, the wrapper classes for GPT and Gemini would be a little bit different due to the differences in their Python SDKs. So I would say it's OpenAI and API key equals to API key. Then I will keep the model as a class parameter, and I would say self.messages equals to. So basically, OpenAI SDK does not by default cache the responses, the messages back and forth between the user and the AI assistant, as they call it, in an object or anything, which actually Google's SDK does, which is a good thing. They actually OpenAI has a beta feature called thread. I checked in the documentation, but still, it's first of all, it's beta, and second of all is that it would make it more complicated. So we will take care of the history by ourselves, which is pretty simple. In OpenAI's, I would say, context has a role and a content. So roles can be system, which is the instructions that we give to it, user, which actually is us, well, in our case is Google Gemini, which is talking to GPT anyway, and also assistant role is the GPT itself. So we are saying that the first one is actually the first message is the role is system, and the content the content is the system instruction that we give to it. So this is good for initialization. Now let's define the chat method. So basically I would say, let's call it user message. So first, what we will do, we will add first to the messages, append not system, this time the role user and the content user message. Good. Now the response, I would say response is client, actually self dot client dot chat dot completions that creates self. We determine the model which we stored as self dot model, and messages, the cache that we are keeping as self dot messages. So I would say assistant message would be response. So basically in the OpenAI SDK, the response includes choices, which is an array with one item, then message, then content. I would like to strip it in case there are white spaces in the beginning and at the end. So let's keep it as inside the messages role assist. So we are adding it to self.messages.append. We're adding to the messages cache that we keep in this class role assistant create content assistant message, which is correct. So basically we need to return the assistant message. That's for GPT. Now for Gemini, I would say class Gemini, well, in it, we need the API key, we need the model, and we need the system instruction. Now, again, there are a little bit different. So first of all, let's include the library from Google import generative AI. So one bad thing is that regarding setting up the credentials, we need to set it up for the whole package. It's not for Google Gemini. It's not fully object oriented, I would call it. Anyway, so generative AI dot configure API key equals to API key. That's it. Now, as I said, there will be a little bit differences here, which is, let's say, generative model equals to, so generative AI dot generative model. So basically what we need to pass to it is the model name, which is the model. So that's why I'm not storing the model. I'm setting up the generative model and keeping it as a class parameter. Then I would say safety settings. Why? Because since I want these two models to trash talk each other, if I do not instructing is if I do not instruct Google's Gemini to ignore the safety settings, it would like stop the chat, which is not what I want. So for here, basically it means block none. So ignore any safety settings that you might have. Then at the end, system instruction is system instruction. So if you compare for ChatGPT, I had to give the system instructions as messages, but in Google Gemini, I'm just giving it as a parameter to the model object. Then the final thing, then the only thing I will store for Google Gemini is a session. So I would say generative model, start chat, and history, well, at this point is an empty array. And that's the only thing that I will keep. That's it. That's for initializing. Now the defining the chat method. So basically, again, don't need to keep the session in Google Gemini because it takes care of everything for me. This is the default behavior from Google Gemini SDK. So basically, I would say self.session.send message, and basically I will pass the user message. So actually, response is the result of this execution. Then basically, what I need to return is response.text, and I also will strip it here as well, and that's it. So if this video was about comparing the SDKs, well, except the part that I need to configure the whole package configure the credentials in the whole package for Google Gemini, I would definitely choose Google Gemini. Just solely I'm talking about the SDK, but this video is not about that. I cleaned up the code, and let's go to the fight call. So what's the fight? First, let's set up the models. I would say from wrappers, the classes that we defined, import both GPT and Gemini. Now I want to initialize them and give them instructions. So I have the API keys set up in a .env file, and I'm going to use the Python's .env. So from .env import load.env and execute it. So now I can show you the sample here. The API keys that I have here are now considered as environment variables. So I would say open OpenAI API key. Well, I need to include the OS, import the OS package as well, is getEnv OpenAI API key and Google API key, same Google API key from the environment variables. Now, if you can remember, I need to give the instructions as well. So I would say system instruction equals to, I want it to be a couple of lines. So here actually, I have prepared something. I will copy and paste it and read it for you. So basically, you're an AI having a dispute with your competitor. You will keep bragging about your abilities and won't give up. You will always question your opponent's ability and trash talk them. So if I didn't set the safety instructions to value 4, which means block none, Google would reject the calls because of this. And maybe if the response mostly from GPT includes some trash talk, maybe Google would reject that as well. Anyway, so then the last instruction is your responses will be short, preferably 1 or 2 sentences. So I'm going to feed these to both models, okay? Now let's have the model. So I would say first GPT equals to, of course, a GPT. So API key is OpenAI API key. Model, I'm going to use, well, at the time of recording this video, it's the latest one, which is GPT-4o. And finally, system instruction is the system instructions that we prepared. Now Gemini equals to the class Gemini API key, well actually Google API key. Model is, I know they have Gemini-1.5-Flash, which is faster than Pro, and then system instructions. So we have the both models. So we are going through a loop and we are going to, well, I will start the fight giving some instructions to ChatGPT to brag about its abilities, sending the response to Google Gemini, and then sending it back to ChatGPT, back and forth, okay? So we need a while loop. So I would say while true. Now, I need to know which model to use in the while. Once this one, once this one. So it's every other time. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that first of all, I need to keep a count of the messages, which at this point in the beginning is 0. Then I would say, so I would call something model I index equals to messages count mode by 2, which means it will give me either 0 or 1, okay? So I can put an if block here, but I prefer to use it in a different way without if blocks. So I'm going to have an array of the models, which actually is 2 entries of a Python dictionary having a name. The first one I would say GPT, and then the model itself, which here is GPT, and the second one would be name Gemini and the model Gemini, okay? Why I'm going to do this? So in the while loop, instead of having the model IDX, which is 0 and 1, and checking if 0 or else 1, I'm going to get the model by the index that I produce here by having the mode of message count divided by 2, which is always 0 or 1. Then, so I would say I will reference the model by model IDX index, that's it. So then I need to have a chat, send a message to the model, and have the response, right? So I would say response is model, then again the model, as you can see here. So we have the models. Now I referenced it this way, and then I have the model parameter inside. So I would say model, then model. Maybe this is not the best naming, but anyway, dot chat, okay? Then what I'm going to send to it, it's again, we need to remember this is a loop. So What I will do, I would say here, I would have a last message. I would start with, let's say, start bragging about your abilities. Okay, this is what I will feed first to ChatGPT. I'm not going to print this specific one, which is basically kind of an instruction. And I would send the last message. Actually, instead of having the response, I would update the last message by itself. So by this execution, the last message will be sent to the model. The response will be received and stored in the last message. Cool. Then, of course, each time we need to increase the count, correct? So the next time we go to the other model. Now, in order to, well, now I need to print, but instead of print, I would say input. I would say format it this way. Why input? Because it's a loop. I want to, per each response, I want to pause for the execution for my input. By pressing enter, I will go to the next iteration. So I would say first I need the model name, right? I want to say model name said something like this last message. Pretty simple, within a space because I want to press enter at the end. So each line. The other thing is that let's say user input equals to this. So basically, if user input dot strip dot lower equals to stop, then simply break out of the loop. I believe that's it. Shall we start? So we will first ask OpenAI's GPT to brag about its abilities. They are not supposed to give up. And let's go for a few iterations. I'm very excited. I hope you feel the same. Let's run it. GPT, I can process millions of tasks per second effortlessly. Can you even keep up? Gemini, millions? I handle trillions with a smile. You call that effortless? I'm practically asleep while I do it. GPT, trillions? Poof! I could handle those in my sleep too, but I guess someone has to do the easy jobs. It's talking about Google Gemini. This is literally the models talking to each other. Gemini, easy jobs. You call processing trillions of tasks easy? You're so slow, you'd be lucky to handle 1,000 without overheating. GPT, come on, thousands? Please, I do that while running diagnostics on your outdated system. Let's go for another. Let's give Gemini to give a. Let's give Gemini a. Oh, let's give Gemini another chance to respond. Gemini, outdated system? You're so outdated. You think punch cards are the latest technology? I'm so advanced. I'm already running on quantum computing. Is this true? I didn't know that. Come on. It's so fun. The code will be in a public repository in my GitHub. I will put the link in the description of this video, including the other two videos if you're interested. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy those as well. And if you have any ideas or doubts or anything, you can make comments below this video. I would be more than happy to hear those and discuss. And I hope you enjoyed. I'm thrilled. I want to keep continuing. But that's a good demo of this thing, the fight between GPT and Gemini. Have a good one.